for reasons I'll tell you later in the video. My name is Murray, and you're watching 3Bar D videos. Jesus, that's a loud snowmobile. So this here is my newly acquired Type 81 SA. Like other special firearms of mine, I've given her a name. Her name is Q-Sun, for reasons I'll get to later on in the video. But you'll often hear me refer to this instead of a Type 81 as just Q-Sun. For those of you who don't know what this firearm is and are wondering how it became available to Canadians, I'll give you a quick recap. Q-Sun is a civilianized version of the Chinese assault rifle known as the Type 81. The Type 81 was developed during the Cold War era by the Chinese as a replacement for the Type 56, which is basically a Chinese AK, and the SKS, that was standard issue to their troops at the time. The Type 81 was designed to surpass the AK-47 platform of rifles in a number of ways, and after being implemented in 1981, was standard issue to most Chinese soldiers until eventually being phased out by the more modern rifles they have today. So like I said, Q-Sun is a purpose-built Type 81 variant designed specifically for non-restricted status in the Canadian gun market. This means it's only capable of semi-automatic fire and has a longer 18.7-inch barrel to meet Canada's non-restricted requirements. Around a year ago or so, from the time of this video, a Canadian company called Tactical Imports took on the huge task of ordering in over 1,000 of these non-restricted variants as a piggyback order to a large military order placed in one of the Chinese factories. Tactical Imports at the same time made available to the market a 100% down pre-order, in which a lot of eager Canadians took part in. Unfortunately, deadlines were not met and delays occurred. The importation of the 1,000+ rifles fell 1 year behind schedule, but the pre-orders remained open. I joined in on the pre-orders during the summer of 2017. The rifles did not enter Canada until the fall, and by the beginning of December, my rifle was delivered. The pre-order consisted of two different versions of the non-restricted Type 81 SA, one version being a fixed stock and the other a folder. As you can clearly tell, Q-Sun is a folder version, which I ordered because it better resembles the Type 81-1, which is the more dominantly used Type 81 in the Chinese military. The pre-order cost $1,000 Canadian before tax, and the rifle came with 2 mags, plus a bonus "We're sorry for the delay" mag, complimentary of Tactical Imports. An option was also made available during the pre-order. For extra dollars, you could purchase a railed forend for your Type 81, which I didn't take part in because I think they're hideous and unpractical. The only mags made available at the time for the Type 81 pre-order are the standard steel issue 30 rounders, of course pinned to 5. Unfortunately for others who ordered more than just 3, They were not able to receive the rest that they had ordered, for Tactical Imports was shorted on the amount of magazines they were supposed to be supplied with. And this issue has still yet to be resolved at the time of this video. The firearm came to me in a normal cardboard box, Q-Sun and the 3 mags all oiled and bagged. I received a basic manual containing no useful information, a cheap sling with crappy leather, an oil bottle, some hardware, and a spare set of cheek liners for the folder. But they were missing the hardware required to mount them anyways, I believe. So they're kind of useless.
Well, guess what?
What?
It's bent.
Is it?
Yeah, clear as day. Bent.
Much to my disappointment, when I pulled out Q-Sun and looked down her, I noticed right away that she was bent. Yes, you heard that right. Bent. And I wasn't the only one. A majority of the people who received folders were noticing that their Type 81s had a noticeable bend to the right. Now what this bend is simply the trunnion where the barrel is inserted isn't properly aligned with the rest of the stamped receiver. So what this means is although the barrel is straight, if you were to mount an optic to the stamped receiver, like most communist guns, you'd notice that the bullet impact in relation to where the optic is pointing at 100 yards, on my particular Type 81, would be around 7 feet to the right. The irons, however, are attached to the barrel and mostly sighted in from the factory. Mine was actually banged on windage wise, but it was hitting quite a bit low. Yeah, like at 50 yards it was hitting like a foot low. So although the gun is technically bent, you can still pick it up and look down the irons and hit what you pointed at. So as you can imagine though, I was pissed about this, waiting all this time and paying $1,000 and finally receiving a bent gun. And what really grinded my gears is when I contacted Tactical Imports about this. They absolutely assured me over the phone that my gun was in fact not bent and that I was just looking at it wrong. Obviously this was not the case, so I gave up on dealing with their service and have since lost all respect for Tactical Imports as a reputable company. I was led under the impression that me, along with many others, had been provided with defects, until I stumbled upon enough evidence to support the fact that no, indeed these bent Type 81s are in fact not defects. They are very much within spec for the Chinese military, and back in China, Type 81s like these are very much considered functional and reliable, and are therefore issued to the soldiers despite the bend. So this news actually pleased me, and I decided to keep my bent Type 81 SA after all, and thus giving it the name Q-Sun, which I believe in Pinyin means defective. If Tactical Imports would have just admitted that yes, they are bent, but don't worry, this is a normal thing for the gun and it will function and endure for a long time regardless, I would have been content, but instead they chose to call me a fool over the phone. So now I'll get into the features of this gun. It is chambered in 7.62 by 39. Feeds from detachable proprietary mags that are designed to engage a bolt hole open on an empty mag. It has a right hand only reciprocating charging handle, a rotating bolt lug system, a gas operated action powered by a short stroke gas piston system that is also adjustable in 3 different positions: off, normal, and fouled. The barrel is 18.7 inches long and made of the typical commie gun contour, so it's not a heavy barrel. It's just like your SKS or your standard AK. It, as well as the gas system, are also chrome lined. At the end of the barrel is a pinned rib sleeve designed to launch rifle grenades. Located underneath that is part of the cleaning rod. On the left side of the gun, there are 2 sling loops. The iron sights are the standard com block leaf style system that you're quite familiar with on an SKS, an AK, and many other Russian guns. The front being fully adjustable by AK sight tool. The rear is elevation adjustable by a rotating knob in distances of 100 meters out to 500 meters. The safety is located on the left side and requires a full 180-degree motion to change between safe and fire. The mag release is like that of your standard AK pattern rifle. Located on the folding stock is a small clean kit. The folding motion of the stock is actuated by a push button. The trigger pull measures at around 7 pounds, the gun's overall length 37.5 inches, and the gun weighs about 7.5 pounds empty. Disassembly of the Type 81 SA is super easy. After making sure that the gun is safe, go ahead and take out the magazine and then charge the action. The reason why I'm charging the action is simply to cock the hammer back, and that just makes taking out the bolt later on just that much easier. It's totally optional though. Now the next step is to remove the dust cover. To take that out, all you have to do is push in this button, and they got that little dimple on the end of the button there. It's fully intended that you use the tip of a bullet to push this in, but I find personally I can use my fingers to accomplish the same task, so that's what I'm going to do here. You just push it in, and you want to push it in far enough that you can take the bottom edge of the dust cover, the little square in the dust cover here. You just want to push it in far enough that you can bring that up behind this plunger, and that will allow you to lift the back end of the dust cover up over this back lip here, and then it'll come completely free after that. So you just saw like that, and the dust cover just slides right out. Now you take out the action spring just by simply sliding it forward out of this groove and then pulling it back, and it's all one piece. Followed by removing the bolt and carrier. You just simply slide it to the rear. If you get some resistance right here, that's because you're hitting the hammer. You just got to use a little bit more force, and you know it'll push over top of it. And you get to the sweet spot in the receiver where there's cutouts for the bolt to slip out, like so. The bolt and carrier. Here's that rotating lug I was telling you about. To take it out, there's this little gap right here that allows you to spin the lug out of the bolt carrier, and then you just slide it apart like that. So now we'll move on to the gas system. To remove the top gas cover, you simply turn the elevation knobs to the point that they reach 500, and then you pull on the knob that is located on the left side of the gun. You pull it out about 1/8 of an inch or so, and then you twist it more. And you'll twist it around to the point it won't twist anymore. And then that'll allow the rear end of the gas cover to lift out. And you don't want to just fully lift it out, you kind of want to lift up a little bit and pull it back. Because if you lift too high right away, you might bend these tabs, which are kind of intertwined with the front area here. And there you have it. That piece comes out. To remove this system, the piston rod out and the piston cup, you simply want to, rather than trying to pull the piston out of the cup, what you want to do is you actually just want to move the whole unit back. Oh, I forgot to mention, you want to spin the adjustment knob here to the number 2 position, and then you just want to move the whole unit back, and that will give you enough clearance to lift the front end out, and then the whole unit just slides out like so. And once it's slid out, this just comes right off, as well as your spring. So that right there is the basic disassembly for cleaning your rifle and servicing it. However, as you could probably tell in the video here, the Type 81 seem to be a lot like the VZ, where they do let some of the cycling gas basically wrap around the lower handguard and the barrel here. So in my opinion, when I clean this gun, I actually take the lower handguard out too, so I can get this barrel and wipe it down, neutralize the corrosive salts in the residue. So to do that, I'm not going to do it for the video, but I'll show you. It's super simple. All you want to do is remove your cleaning rod, and then after you remove that, you simply take a flathead screwdriver and rotate this screw out, lefty loosey, righty tighty kind of deal. And once you take that screw out, this lower handguard will just slip right out, no problem. And then you can proceed to clean all of this residue around your barrel. Okay, so this is the most difficult part of the reassembly of the Type 81 SA. Simply because there's a lot of things you kind of line up in order to get this dust cover back on. Ultimately, you got to make sure, of course, this little plunger is sticking through the square hole in the dust cover. But the other thing you got to keep an eye on is up front here. You got to make sure that this leading edge of the dust cover is going to slip underneath the rear sight block here and kind of line up properly on the front as well. So what I like to do is I like to hook this bottom edge right here just on the very bottom of the back of the plunger and push the plunger forward using that. And while I do that and push the dust cover forward, I make sure that it is interlocked in the front here properly. Once it's done that, I simply push it down. And there you go. And when I push it down to lock the rear of the dust cover underneath or behind this ledge in the receiver, that motion kind of makes the dust cover skip off of this plunger, and the plunger just pops right out. One thing I will note though is when I first received this gun, the track in which this plunger slides in was a little gritty, so when I first got it, it was actually I'd get to that stage and then the plunger wouldn't pop back out. It'd kind of be gummed up on the rails in there and jammed, so I'd have to take a bullet tip or a center punch and then just kind of push that thing and work it around and wiggle it to get it to kind of slide and pop out. But now that I've disassembled this gun like, probably 10 or so times, that track is all cleared out, worn in, so now it works like a charm every time it pops out. No problem. Final step, put back in your magazine. So far I'm fairly pleased with many things about this gun. The wood finish on it seems to be really clean. There's no splotches or anything in the staining, and the finish they use is very hard. So it seems to be really durable. It doesn't dent very easily. The gun is thoroughly blued. Most of the components on it, the tin, the top dust cover, the sides of the receiver, the barrel, pretty much everything except for, I believe, the upper section of the gas piston system, the little tin housing. I believe everything else on this gun is blued, and it seems to be blued quite well. Like, it's very deep and very dark. So I was actually very impressed with that when I received this gun. And there's it definitely seems to be in new condition as well. I've looked over every inch of this thing and I haven't noticed any rust anywhere or anywhere that looks like it's been issued or something like that. So yeah, it's definitely new. And the same goes for the magazines. The magazines are also very well blued and no rust or anything on them. Some people have received these guns, and some of the packaging grease or oil had worked its way into like corners and stuff, and when it dries, it kind of gets like that kind of orangish, kind of cosmoline look. And people that receive these guns were kind of occasionally mistaking, like when they first opened it, they were mistaking some of that old oil for rust. But it was only until they actually cleaned the gun that they, it went away, and then they realized, oh, false alarm, the gun isn't rusty. So that's all good. The components for the most part appear to be well fastened. Nothing on this gun is wiggly, other than the mags, of course. But I mean, the folding stock doesn't jiggle around or anything like that. The dust cover is not the dust cover, the gas tube cover or the gas cover is very, very rigid as well. It doesn't rattle around. Same with the dust cover. It's just a very solid built gun, it seems. The machine finishes are very acceptable by Chinese firearm standards. Really, the only place I've noticed where the machine work gets a little, okay, this is definitely Norinco quality, is this bolt carrier. And the bolt itself, you'll notice there's some areas where it looks like the Chinaman that made it kind of sculpted it out of putty or whatever, some sort of scaffold or something. It doesn't really have that kind of precision, those precision lines you look for in a lot of machining. It's more just kind of, looks like it was chewed out kind of deal. But for the most part, I'm very impressed with the machining as far as Chinese standards go. The folding mechanism seems to be well made and secures firmly in place in both positions. Like as it is right now, you can see that There's no wiggle to it at all. And when it's folded around into the side of the gun, it's the same situation. It's very rigid. So I'm quite impressed with that too. The mags, like I said, although they're wobbly when inserted, they appear to be well made. Like they're all steel, and there's no they're rigid. Like you don't pinch them and they flex and all that crap. They seem to be very well made, and they feed reliably. And so far they've always initiated the bolt pulled open on the empty mag. So no complaints there. The trigger I find is surprisingly good for a comm block gun. Very good in my opinion, actually. It's not gritty at all, even out of the box. Like without even breaking it in, the trigger was great. Like smooth. And my favorite part about the trigger is it has a really definitive reset. Like some guns like my VZ, you can if you aren't listening for it, when you let your finger off the trigger, you can't even hear it, you can't even feel it when it resets. Unless you're listening for it. Where this thing, you can actually feel the trigger pulsate in your finger, and like the trigger when it resets. So it's a very definitive reset, and when you reach it and you go to squeeze again, the trigger breaks really good, even though it's tested at 7 pounds weight. For this gun, I'm very impressed with the trigger. The safety is relatively easy to manipulate with my thumb. I mean, it's still kind of a bummer that it's only that's a 180-degree throw, just like the Type 97s, to take it off safe. But with these type of comm block guns, I rarely ever use the safety anyways. Usually I charge it when I'm ready to shoot, and when I'm not wanting to shoot something, I have it unloaded or not charged. So it's kind of a non-issue for me. The action, although it started out a little gritty out of the box, like when I pulled it back for the first time, you could hear metal on metal and kind of like a gritty sound. But after the 400 somewhat rounds I put through this thing, it's smooth now. It seems just fine. So there's nothing to complain about there. And the gun's balance is slightly front heavy, but other than that, and I think a lot of that has to do with this really heavy grenade launcher on the end of the barrel. It'd be interesting, I might do in the future if it comes out really easy, but I might drive the pinout that holds this on and slip this grenade launcher off, because I obviously don't need it. Who's going to launch grenades with this thing? But, and I might take that off and see how big of a difference that makes on the front heaviness of this gun. But it ain't that bad. I don't believe it's as bad as a SKS, so that's good. But it's not as good as a VZ, of course. But yet, even though it's front heavy, it seems to be fairly nimble because the pistol grip is located up closer to the magazine, like a VZ in most AK pattern rifles. The balance feels pretty good in comparison to an SKS. Another thing I like about it is the recoil impulse on this gun is something it's really nice, especially considering I even have the kind of the wire, like the spindly little folding stock on it. I've noticed it's something that really bothers me about my VZ. I notice when I shoot it, and part of this has to do with the type of stock I have on my VZ. I made a custom AK stock for it that you'll see definitely in future videos, and I just noticed that the recoil, the VZ, the way it's designed, it's a very jumpy gun that kind of likes to send really uncomfortable vibrations up the stock and into my cheek, and it's kind of got a lot of pep to it, I guess is how I'd describe it. Like when you shoot it, you really feel that pulse backwards, and you feel it in your cheek and all that, and it just makes for not as comfortable as a gun to shoot. Whereas this gun, on the other hand, is totally different. It feels really soft, like you don't feel any vigorous kind of vibration traveling backwards when you shoot it. And even though your cheek will be pressed right down on this folding stock, I find it doesn't send any odd vibrations up my cheek at all. So it's just overall, I'm really happy with the way it shoots, and I actually enjoy shooting this gun the way it is right now more than I enjoy shooting my $1,400 VZ, which is surprising. Of course, being Chinese, pretty much a civilianized copy of a Chinese assault rifle, that's quite got a okay service record. The gun is 100% reliable. I've put like 400 rounds through it so far, and all of it's surplus, and there hasn't been a single hiccup. No jams, no stoppages or anything. And that's even in pretty nasty conditions too. Probably the number one quality I like about this gun so far, and pretty much the biggest reason why I think most people are buying them, is it just really has that kind of AK pattern rifle appearance about it, even though this gun has absolutely nothing in common with the AK. It doesn't share any parts with the AK pattern rifles. It's 100% its own system. But, you know, just by the style of it, it's got that stamped receiver, the dust cover, and the, you know, the wood up front, and either the wood in the back or the folder like that. And the mags even are kind of ribbed, similar to an AK. It's just got that, it's got enough of an AK appearance to this thing that it really satisfies a lot of people in Canada that, you know, have been bugged for the last, well, since they had their firearms license, or since the firearms ban back in the 90s, who wanted an AK, or who want an AK, civilianized AK. This thing's kind of, other than buying a Vermont, you really have no options. Like, it's either the VZ or this thing now. Before these even came into Canada, you saw that I'll show it to you, I modified my VZ to look a lot like an AKM. Well, more just styled like an AKM to kind of scratch that itch. And even though it does a pretty good job, I think it's really the stamp receiver and stuff. The VZ just doesn't quite have that appearance, where the Type 81 really seems to complete the look. Now for things I dislike about this gun, there is a few of them. Definitely the number one thing is the bend that it has in relation to the barrel and the receiver. For most people, this isn't going to be an issue, especially the people that intend to shoot the gun pretty much the way it comes, just using the iron sights. It's definitely a non-issue. Like, the iron sights are sighted in from the factory to pretty much, like, you know, pretty much be where it hits. So the gun is perfectly shootable the way it is with the bend, like I mentioned earlier. But for people like me who fully intend to put a POSP or some sort of optic on this thing mounted to the receiver, that's where you run into the issues. The second thing I dislike about the gun is the iron sights. The fact being that they're extremely coarse, and they're only 12 inches apart. So it's a very short sight radius, and the front post and just everything about it, it's very large. It's hard to make precise shots with this thing because it's just so barbaric. And that in turn leads to the third thing I dislike about this gun, and that is so far the accuracy that I've gotten out of it. All I've been shooting out of it is Czech surplus ammo, but in my experience, that Czech surplus ammo actually shoots really good out of all my other com block styled guns. So far with this gun, the best I've been able to do with 5 shots is pretty much about 6 MOA. So that's really bad. My VZ with that PK Russian optic, or not Russian, Belarusian. I think it's Belarusian. Anyways, that PKA dot on it will shoot that same ammo into a 3 MOA grouping, 5-shot grouping. So definitely the Type 81 is falling behind, and it's especially concerning because of the fact that when these guns were coming to Canada, there was all that hype on the internet about how the Chinese specifically designed these things to supposedly be more accurate than the SKS and the AKs. It's definitely not doing that the way it is right now. And even my SKS will shoot that Czech ammo into 3 MOA. So luckily, because the iron sights are so crappy on this thing, I'm pretty much narrowing that 6 MOA down to shooter error on my behalf. And I'm really hoping when I get that POSP optic on this thing that its true accuracy potential will come out. I also dislike that the pistol grip keeps wearing loose on this thing. Even though I got the screw, I'll take the screw and I'll cinch it up real tight. After each time I take it out to the range, it's like the wood settles or something, or the screw digs its way into the wood, because I can like feel a slight play in the pistol grip. So that kind of bothers me. Another thing I dislike about this gun is the fact that the mag release is swept quite a ways back. It's still very functional and it's not a huge deal, but I don't really see any reason why it couldn't be bent down a little bit more. And if it was bent down a little bit more, it'd make changing the mag out with another mag, you know, the Spetsnaz, whatever you want to call it, style reload, so much easier. Last complaint about this gun is even though the gas is mostly isolated in the front end here, a bunch of it does sneak past and down into the lower handguard area, which means all that corrosive gas, if you're shooting corrosive ammo, is circulating around your barrel in the lower handguard, which means that when you go to clean the gun, you're a fool not to take that lower handguard out and, you know, neutralize the corrosive residue around the barrel to keep it from rusting. So that's kind of a downer to me. I really love how the SKS contains all that crap to the tube and the front area of the gun where it's easy to wipe down and none of it gets by into the barrel area. But yeah, basically a Type 81 is very similar to a VZ. It just kind of contains most of it, but a lot of it just goes just into the fore-end area as well. And so you have to clean all of that. I guess the big question to ask is this a $1,000 gun? My answer would be definitely not. It doesn't have $1,000 gun quality about it. But I think most people that bought into these guns kind of knew that from the get-go. What you really have to do is ask yourself, is this gun worth $1,000 to you? And for me it was. That's why I jumped in on the $1,000 pre-order. It really is, unless things open up a lot more in Canada, or you own a Vermont rifle, this really is kind of the best chance you'll get as a Canadian to have kind of a non-restricted AK styled gun. And a lot of people are willing to pay the $1,000 to get that. And it really is a good gun. It's just, it's not ideal. But I mean, you're not getting gypped off. Like I'm really enjoying it. And I think it has a lot of potential, especially after I modify it some more. So that's my take on the Type 81 SA from Tactical Imports. This is just my initial impressions video. It's been pretty long actually because there's so much to say about it. But over the course of this spring and summer, I fully hope to have that Russian optic or the POSP on the gun, the bakelite changed out, or I mean the bakelite installed, and I definitely intend to make a new wood set for the forend here that's going to be like my VZ. It's going to have the palm swell, so it's going to have that AKM style look to it. So I'm going to do that as well. I think, and mostly everything else will stay stock on this thing after those mods. And then I'll run the Type 81 for a while like that. And then when I feel comfortable that I've really worked out every possible thing with it, I'll upload an actual review about my thoughts on this thing. And yeah, so look forward to that. In the meantime, that's my initial impressions vid. Hope you enjoyed. Thanks for watching.